You are listening to the Choose Your Struggle podcast, a member of the Shameless Podcast Network. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That famous quote by the extraordinary Maya Angelou is exactly why I speak. It's why I tell my story and mix education around the topics of mental health, substance misuse and recovery, and drug use and policy with motivation, inspiration, and purpose. So when you're looking for your next keynote or breakout session speaker, reach out. Find me at my website, jschiffman.com, and I promise you, your employees, your group members, the students at your school, everybody will come away having learned something. And that's how we create change. Reach out today.
Spread love, choose your struggle.
Hey y'all, happy Monday. Welcome to a special episode of the Choose Your Struggle podcast, a special Monday motivation episode. What you're going to hear today, as I flirted with a couple weeks ago, is the first half of a conversation with Kyle Blanks talking about the cannabis industry. Remember, Kyle was a guest earlier this season, former Major League Baseball player who now works in the cannabis industry. So we talk about policy specifically in this one and thinking around the cannabis industry. I think that's a better way to say it, not just policy, but thinking. You're going to get the first half this week and the second half next week. So without further ado, enjoy the first half of our conversation. For those of you tuning in, you're going to recognize the voice that you're about to hear from an earlier episode, a Friday episode of this show. And this is the first of what is hopefully going to be a series where we deep dive into the topic of cannabis. So obviously, with that goal in mind, my guest today is the person who knows more about that than anybody else in my life. And that is Kyle Blanks, Road Runner's own Kyle Blanks. The host of the Corner of the Clubhouse Podcast here on the Shameless Podcast Network, and a really incredible resource around the topic of cannabis. Kyle, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time, and I definitely think this will be very successful as something to run over and over with kind of almost that news flash for people who have an interest beyond just seeing things or hearing things. And a lot of that is we're just really trying to help unpack the reality. And I think that's through our conversations and through even now your personal experience, seeing how it can go. I think that's what's very, very achievable. And I do think this will be pretty interesting for people to learn about.
So I think the first thing is for those who maybe hadn't heard, and those who had. In fact, I was on a call today with a potential speaking client who told me that the episode they chose to listen to is ours, which was pretty cool. But for just kind of a 30-second reminder of your relationship currently to the topic of cannabis.
I guess at the beginning, I was a consumer around 2011-12 was my first experience with cannabis in general. As a consumer, I guess in high school, you kind of run across it, but otherwise I never engaged it until I truly felt I just had no real trouble I could get into, and kind of follow that through my career. I had periods of time where I could use it without issue. I had periods of time where I didn't use it because of the issue it would have brought up. And as soon as I was done playing, I got my medical cannabis card in Arizona where I lived. And really just at the end of every season, my goal was always to kind of detox from just the season. And part of that is no longer taking all the pills, which most guys have to, like myself included, always taking anti-inflammatories. And that's just more the constant. You try and stop because you know you're going to have to do it again. And this time, knowing I was no longer going to start again, I got my medical cannabis card. Short of a miracle, I was basically retired, and so I could see what this would do for me, and saw it did something amazing. But I really realized I was at the end of my career on that side of in that chapter of my life, and really kind of just had a nice little buffer of time after playing to really learn things from the ground up. And that's beginning from the consumer side.
So that is a perfect transition, because what we're talking about today, as I said, listeners, this is going to be an ongoing series, and today we're going to be focusing at least what is probably going to be a multi-part episode on cannabis policy. And so, as a guy who works in this, you entered. Was it 2017 or 2018 that you got in on that side?
So 2017, I stopped playing and got my medical cannabis card. 2018 is when I got into the industry on the hemp side, and we'll leave it at that to be able to use that as a designation to help just clarify the sides.
Perfect. So that is such an interesting point, because that's when you really were seeing these states, Colorado legalized it much earlier, but it was kind of a dead zone for a couple of years. And all of a sudden we got this renewed or a rush that we're in the middle of right now. You got in at a very interesting time. Help the listeners understand what was sort of that experience like getting into cannabis in 2018.
My experience was pretty unique in that it came at just I guess everybody's going to insert at their own point in time. Mine came with extensive experience on the consumer side because of my experience in baseball and rehabbing, and now seeing this as truly a therapeutic as opposed to a recreational. It's truly the difference of why I see it the way I see it, as well as my partners, and why they see it the same way. Now, getting into the hemp side of it was inspired by the marijuana side, but genuinely by coming across a lot of topical treatments, like things that I had never really had an experience with in this medium. But otherwise, for the last 12 years, I've been rubbing things all over me to hopefully help me feel better. So knowing that, I have now a more naturalized form of that. For me, it was simply, okay, this is doing what I would otherwise ask anything that I would be using in this scenario to do. Now I'm going to continue to pursue this and see kind of where else this can help me. And even where I kind of inserted, I actually tried to get into medical cannabis in Arizona. There was a dispensary that had let's call it a flight of cannabis strains that they basically had it structured with a little bit of therapeutic value in mind. Like there was something for the morning. There was a little bit to support that, a CBD strain, a hybrid, and an indica. And so as someone at that point who already really had an understanding of how I could use those things for myself, I bought just basically the gram version of each I'm going to put myself through a day of this, and got through it, just documented what I felt, how, like, this is how I would use it anyway. It's so knowing that this was basically their top shelf offering, I at least could say, this is what you'd shoot for. Ideally, no different than the consumable it is food or water, you'd ideally care to find the highest value of consumable you can when you can. So when it's advantageous to be able to buy not necessarily the most expensive, but the best quality of anything, it's just we just know between you and me, it definitely has a cost associated with it. Like that's just the nature of when, cannabis has gone through some crazy times where, when it was illegal, it was valued at a certain point, as well as now being able to kind of go through some random fluctuations based on how it has those surges like you're talking about, whether that is throughout that time of illegality or now as we're seeing it in a different stage of legalization almost. And that's different across different states as well.
So in Arizona at the time, was it medical, or was it only, or I'm sorry, was it only medical, or was it legalized in Arizona at that time?
So I believe it was legalized in Arizona within the last let's call it 6 months. I'm really not entirely sure about the time period. Up until then, it was medical. Yeah, very recently it was legalized as far as recreational or adult use. When I got into it, also kind of that, like, I'm like, okay, there's no way I don't qualify for this. Like, it's going to be easy to walk in and show them anything, scars that, like tell them, let alone like, can I just get walk in with an x-ray? So I go in and I get through all that, hey, someone will call you, so you'll have basically a consultation over the phone later with the doctor. And then after all of that gets done, you'll receive your card in like 7 to 10 days. And I was like, oh shit, like I thought I was walking out of here with this. Like I was going to hit something on the way home. And so once again, one of those resistances you meet when your projection is like, oh, like it took me a lot to get up the kind of the really to get up the energy to go do that for myself, because I was just not sure. Just once again, the first time I left the dispensary, I thought I was going to be arrested by every cop that has a badge, and that's your projection of it never really, unfortunately, if you have the worst projection of it and it aligns with reality, that should be an anomaly. You shouldn't want that ever to be like the status quo, but it's understandable why, if that does happen, you don't have the same feelings that someone like me has, who hasn't had the same resistance or never dealt with the same penalties that other people have for the exact same thing.
So let's talk about that for a second, because obviously policy is the focus of today's discussion. So you then went to New Mexico, which was also a medical state, has recently become a legalized state. How has that, in your experience of working in it and also going to Colorado, which I know you do a lot for work, how are you seeing differences in, as you just correctly or really expertly put it, the idea that cops are going to be busting down your door for this thing or pulling you over for this thing to now? I mean, how has that shifted over the last couple of years?
Well, I can definitely say personally, when we farmed in 2019, our goal was to help basically showcase, like, look, like we don't want to be part of the negative. Like, we do a lot to try and be proactive and stay ahead of the negativity, because nobody wants to be lumped into the negative category of what they're part of. You would always care to be one of the exceptions to the rule, or otherwise, I'm just doing it this way, man. It sucks to know that your experience with it has not been what I would care to give you, and that's something that you only really get with some back and forth. How can I help you? Or what has been your experience with this? Because personally, I met no resistance getting my med card in Arizona. And then that kind of, when I met my current business partners, and my brother's friends' parents. So very good, very good something to kind of have in common there, at least, very good something to, at least an opportunity for people to mesh well. And it happened to do that very well. But otherwise, as I started to develop my relationship with Bob and get a little closer to finally seeing a plant, because Bob had in New Mexico, medical cannabis comes with the potential, if you care or the opportunity, you can pursue private production, which is your own just personal growing rights. So if you're willing to go through the steps to, basically get that accreditation and hold that license, it's available to you. And as someone who, happened to come across a seed that was viable in something they bought, and I killed the first plant I ever tried to grow, it was cool to really get a second try at this, knowing like, if I listen to somebody who knows what they're doing, there's a really good chance I'll succeed, because I missed something in there that's the reason I failed. And I think that was very encouraging, meeting someone who shared with me what they were, quite proficient at and had been doing for themselves for, the better part of their life at that point. Because once again, I haven't faced the same resistances as other people have with this plant, because of my age, because of at what time in my life I engaged it, because when I first did, it was in California and it's really not a big deal. There's all kinds of random variables that kind of come into that experience. But otherwise, New Mexico was a really big learning ground to then When I got here, it was like I found myself being in New Mexico more and going up to Colorado and being a consumer of the market and learning a lot by just, I only go up there every now and then, and it became more semi-regular, and I started seeing differences, started seeing those things like, okay, these types of cultivars are starting to turn over in dispensaries. You're starting to see certain things available at certain price points. You're starting to see certain things just plummet in value because the market is saturated. You're starting to see all of these crazy things relative to that rush. And then that's what you're kind of seeing now, getting back to, is all of these states jumping on it, and basically everyone around them who had an interest is flocking to them, because now it's an accessible industry to them.
So that's a great point, and I think that we're seeing that now as the dominoes are falling faster than they were. Other states are trying to keep up with their neighbors and all this kind of stuff. From your work, how difficult is it for your business to sort of stay up on stuff like that, because there's not one national law that says, here's what's allowed here, here's what's not? I know through our conversations, as you've talked to me about certain products, you're like, is this available in this state? I have to go look, am I allowed to do this for you? Like, it's been a lot of you learning about this. Is that a complicated thing for your business?
Well, as far as the side of it we're on, we got into hemp, which was federally legalized in 2018. So our resistances really only come from those places that do not allow it to the end consumer. And I could be wrong in thinking now that all 50 states are okay, but otherwise, if nothing has changed since the last I really kind of dove into it, there was only 4 states that would not allow hemp products, even hemp-derived products. So being a consumer of all of it, being the reason we became what we became, and decided to learn, go through this experience of vertical integration to learn where we best fit in and how we can now move forward. That was all a product of, valuing the plant overall and understanding the differences and being willing to help educate people on those differences and why you need to, basically just be willing to have the conversation. Because if you think it's all the same, it doesn't matter what information I'm bringing to you. If I can show you that it's not the same, there's a chance I can get you to try it, and there's a chance maybe you'll like it. There's a chance maybe you'll find that degree of consistency and want to participate. And that's when, feeling better is up to you.
So that stigma is very alive and well. Obviously, that's a thing you and I talk about a lot. And I've read enough articles saying that there's this thinking that once a national legalization is allowed, and especially as currently is the case, that for whatever reason, cannabis is still a Scheduled 1 substance from the national government. Once that's removed and they accept the fact that there's a lot of medical benefits, that some of that stigma will go away. Obviously, there will always be some. Are there things that your company is hoping to do, that you're kind of developing now with the hope that down the line you can get more into and that's available? Or are you kind of taking this thing as it goes?
A lot of it is trying to, I guess, really try and lay our potential growth and try and really lay out the things we want. Our goal is to help people. So whether that be now getting into providing edibles that are of our same product, if you've tried the tincture like you have, that same potential benefit is in those types of products now that otherwise are far less offensive to people because it's a food item now. That's us being able to help. But once again, a lot of this comes with education, because even if I give you something that works and educate you on it, most of it working is predicated on you using it. That's why, our goal from the beginning has been education and advocacy. I think you will only gain loyalty through that, because if you have a good product to follow up with, if you have a good product to follow up good information with, basically it's up to that person to figure it out for themselves. And if you provide, once again, even a framework of how to achieve that, like talking to you, hey man, put it on like this, and go for it. And, not too long ago, you send me a text, talking about how far you're running as opposed to what you are before. And you definitely believe it's because of this. I believe it's probably a component, but the fact is your consistency is what actually helps what you believe help you actually do what what it can. You believe to the point where it's like stretching before you run. If you believe it has a very good outcome, doing it over and over is probably going to help, especially if it just actually helps.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, because there's so much garbage in the history of cannabis, what does advocacy and education actually look like? And you've sent me pictures from you talking to these organizations, or trying to get them to carry your brand and use your brand. And is it? I guess my question would be, what percentage of what you're talking to people about right now is dispelling myths, and what part is actually educating on what is capable?
It depends on who you're talking to, because you have to be able to read the person who, where are they coming from with that disbelief or resistance? Or some people are coming with just flat neutrality, which is really cool because they are just willing to learn. Most people who are opposed to it have what they believe is already the accurate projection of what would happen to them or how it's going to go. That's like, to me, that's where I'll always challenge someone. It's like, I understand if you think I'm lying to you, but if you believed I'm not lying, this is something new. I could challenge anyone to, if you're engaging me because you want this to relax, let's say that's what you were thinking. My thought is, why are you more comfortable doing it with something like alcohol than this? At a certain point, you had to figure out why that action had that outcome you were pursuing. And more importantly, does it have a collateral benefit or damage to you if you overuse it, underuse it? Like what's the value of it as a consumable for what you're trying to use it for? And that I will tell anybody is a measure of education and experience. Data is the product of experience. Like you have to put yourself through something. Also, couple that with a bit of self-awareness or the ability to articulate how you feel to other people so they can help you paint that picture. But if you already know what it's going to do without listening to somebody explain something different to you, it doesn't matter what they tell you, and that's why I say the same thing to everybody. And basically the first thing is, what's your experience with it, or what are you looking to get out of this? Because if you're looking for a cure for anything, I will tell you, I don't know where to find anything like that. But I can tell you, this seems to be an incredible tool for people who really want to participate. And you have to talk to me so I have some information about how you are participating, let alone how you would want to or care to. Because if, anytime someone explains to me that I don't have the time, or I don't have a good time to use it, as well as I do, that is absolutely not true. It simply doesn't take the time you think it does, which once again, that may not be your fault, but you also think it's going to do something to you that it won't. And I can't tell you what it exactly will do for you, but I can tell you, if you were to follow a direction on the dosing that I would suggest, I would argue there's a very, very, very small chance for an adverse reaction. And most of that's because if you have no experience with it, we really need to see where you're at. That's the problem with people going to a recreational, type establishment and buying the biggest thing and eating it, because that shit does taste good, but it's not going to go good for you later. And unfortunately, I think everybody needs to experience that, because that is truly, if you don't understand the measure of what you shouldn't do with this, you'll almost certainly never understand the measure of what you should do with it. And that takes education and experience.
Yeah, everybody's got the story of the time they thought they knew what they were taking, and oh boy, they did not.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
and you and I have talked about my recent experience of that of with trying Delta 8 out, which is a new, and well, not new. It's an old, new in popularity strain or breakdown of cannabis. So actually, leads me to my next question for you. As someone who has a deep interest in this and follows this very closely, as you know, because you and I talk about it almost daily, it's very hard to stay up to date with the latest policy changes around cannabis. Like I said earlier, every state's doing their own thing. How hard is that for your business to be like, all right, we kind of have to monitor this on a day-to-day basis to know what we're able to do? Or are you comfortable playing in your corner of, the Southwest and just being confident in what is available to you down there?
Well, a lot of things, I will say your perspective can change when you go through an experience of providing something for yourself. So when I first was able to smoke something I grew for myself, it gave me an entirely different understanding of what I was buying and when I was buying it after that. And that hasn't stopped since, 2018. I don't remember exactly when I helped pull down my first plant. And once again, things I just don't really pay attention to, but otherwise, I think if you don't have those types of experiences, is to marry you to the plant or to gauge where you are with it, kind of like, what is it you're willing to engage with? Because typically, the industry itself is so compartmentalized, growers, things, because it's gotten so big. Vertical integration is typically going to be a reflection of either small and mighty or large and just you're eating loss. Small and very efficient, or large and you have margins that basically engage a little bit of like we're going to lose something, but we're hitting everybody kind of thing. And I think you given what we are in, our policy is federal. So personally, we get to keep an eye on the different states, and other than some of the slight variables between them, adult use is going to have similarities across the board. It's not that it's going to be maybe potentially even glaring differences in certain places, but otherwise those differences are going to be pretty slight to the fact that it's all running pretty much the same way. That compartmentalization, mostly because of the size aspect and people's, the first time you get to go to a dispensary, you may be talking to somebody who has less plant experience than you do. That's not even, anything more than what it is. But if somebody who's suggesting something for you has less experience with this than you do, that's going to be a difficult thing to process when they haven't asked you how you feel or what's your experience or what do you do? That's exactly like walking into the cage and being told to hit like this, or sitting in the chair and being told to think like this.
So that's such a great point. And that's something that you and I laugh about a lot because, so for the listeners, my recent story was I walked into a CBD store here in Philly, a new one for the first time. And the woman was so helpful, but I felt like, if you know the Ron Swanson moment in Parks and Rec where he walks into Home Depot and tells the salesman, "I know more than you do," she was basically giving me this long rundown, and I kept wanting to be like, I know, yes, I know, and it was Kyle and I've laughed about that a lot. So that's something that's very, I think, different about the cannabis industry and the alcohol industry, right? We don't expect our local bartender, or that's a bad example because they usually do know, but like our local waiter, right, to know the real intricate differences between types of liquor or even brands of whiskey, right? That's, I think, a good example, or beer, which can be a very broad spectrum. And that can be okay because, the result's going to be the same thing unless you're thinking you're drinking beer and you're actually drinking whiskey. Like, that's a big difference, right? But with cannabis, that is not the same. You need to know what you're selling. So as someone who is in this industry, how well, how do you try to educate people about this is what this is? You need to like be very specific about this product.
So, I basically, if I'm talking to somebody, if they walk into the store, how can I help you? What are you here for? Because, asking the right sequence of questions is going to help you help them. Like, I'm here to help you find what you need, but I don't know what you need until you help me, and that's like, I could easily just hand someone CBD and tell you like, yeah, use it like this. And you may, start to see a difference for yourself. But a lot of that's going to be in your ability to do it over and over and find a routine with it. Anything else in there in our store, it's a supplement, a vitamin, protein. It's the same conversation. If you want to have a better quality of life, you have to evaluate those inputs and, basically put yourself through that monotonous routine to see what is working and how it's working for you. And that's, a lot of that I have learned comes with just basically asking someone how they feel and sharing whatever experience you may have that as close to that as possible. And with the caveat and understanding of I'm not you, so you're going to have to, this is as close to that as I can understand, that I have shared in that type of pain or discomfort or whatever that is. And this is what helped me, or this is what I do when I experience that. Like probiotics have changed my life. And it's not like, hey, I want to do an infomercial. It's just, if you stop using them, you feel a difference. But I can't explain to somebody what that difference is entirely, because it's been such a like ubiquitous part of my life for so long now. That same thing with CBD. It's just, you have to let me know where you're at so I can kind of put this into your routine for the day. Here's a sample. It will take, if you went into the bathroom right now and put it on, it would take a whole few minutes. And then you could see that other than trying this in this scenario, the rest of this day is totally exactly how you've done every other day. So if you notice a difference in how it feels to drive around in your car or walk around and do whatever housework, there's probably a safe bet that if you can try and create those types of experiments with consistency, you'll notice if it's actually doing it for you or not. And I stand behind what I do because I want to help people, and I genuinely believe our products work.
So that's awesome because you know what you're selling, but sort of to my question, the average person behind the average bud tender, they don't have the knowledge you do. And the average consumer doesn't have the money nor the time to buy a bunch of different strains and a bunch of different products to test it out. You have to at least be able to narrow it down a little bit. So how can somebody listening, because there isn't a policy or even a set, list, right? It's not like if I walk into dispensary X and dispensary Y, they're going to have the same thing. How can someone do their research? How can someone get knowledgeable on this before they go in and pick a strand or pick a product?
Some of what that's going to be is probably talking to the person in front of you. Some of it's going to be the willingness to dive in, like you would if I handed you a bottle of something you wanted to try, like everybody does and understands. That's what I've understood is cannabis offers has such a valuable therapeutic aspect to it. Should you participate in that way, it also parallels alcohol in that most people use it in a way that challenges their palatable reality for the next 5 hours, whatever the fuck it is. So that's what I've seen as the resistance is trying to help people requires a lot more help than challenging them on, dude, I bet this will knock you out, dude. Like that's the funny thing I've learned to engage. So knowing that, a lot of that's going to be, you have to really let's say, go look in the mirror, and it's not to see what you look like, but okay, what am I trying to achieve? What is it I'm looking to get out of this? Because it's not going to do something it can't do. And if your perspective isn't in the right place, you're going to, for one, it may not get you high the first time, as I've heard that's very common. I also believe if you get the right thing and have the right mindset, there's a very reasonable expectation you might get really high. So, but a lot of that is for someone like me who consumes it so regularly. I mean, if you're not impaired, the term high is very subjective. As someone who functions very, very much the same, whether on or off now, because of understanding why I'm not smoking at this current moment in time or consuming, but I almost always have our products all over me, or I'm using a tincture or something like that. So a lot of it comes with if even if that is only spending $20, what can you achieve for yourself for $20? What is it you can get out of that $20? Because same thing with what I do. I know if you're willing to spend money on it, my job is to help educate you on what is it you'd like to see happen? How would you like to try and achieve that? And can we do it with your budget? Like, can you buy an edible for $20? I absolutely bet you can. You just got to go to the right place, and you're just probably going to get one try at it. But if you go about it the right way, this might be the doorway to why you start to divert more money to this and less money to other things.